In past videos, we ripped out the floor, made a new one out of some panels, applied nonskid to some of those panels, and cork strips to the rest with teak deck systems in the seams. And finally, we have hit the home stretch for most of the visible areas. There was just one piece missing.
Alright, so sometimes you do stuff that just makes sense in the short term, but not in the long term. So this is the hole in the centers for the mast. And at the time, I had all the panels but one made, and I ran out of time to make that panel, and I was like, okay, I just needed to continue on with projects. And so I did all the cork, filled all the seams, because that's just how stuff was working. And I have now finally made that panel, and cut the notch. So now I have the structural part of the panel done. I'm gonna cover it all in paint first, and then I will scribe my lines, figure out the spacing to lay the cork on this one. And then this will be the last panel, removable panel that I do on the boat. I'm gonna work on painting this tonight. Yeah, just trying to keep chugging along. And then this doesn't really quite match, but it's okay. I'm even think I might have to trim some of this cork around the mast as it gets installed, but I don't actually have the mast in the boat right now, so it's hard to truly know what size it needs to be. This is off. I think it's a teak, like floor trim piece, or it's a ceiling trim piece, I'm not sure which, for the mast. That's gonna go back around here and cover up any gaps. And that is what I use to trace this opening. So I'm hoping that it's the right size, but potentially when I launch the boat and put the floor in with the sole, it might not actually fit. And so it'll be a kind of a fun scramble at the last minute to try to get everything to work before we try to move on. And so I just glued on all of the cork strips tonight, and so that's why there's all little spacers in it still. I don't know if I'll put the seam sealant in until I'm ready to work on the boat, as this sealant is kind of expensive and I don't want to go through a partial tube and then have to waste the rest of it. So yeah, so one of the next steps in the boat modification is all of this non-skid, which is not very grippy or effective when it's wet in shoes, needs to be sanded. So I need to scuff all of this up so I can apply cork on top of it. So it's a not fun, noisy task, which will probably be sped up or time-lapsed. And you'll go, man, that was really quick, really fast. And the reality is it will have sucked for a long time while doing it.
You can see the haze. That is all essentially gel coat dust.
With the gel coat and a bit of fiberglass ground down, it was time to bust out the bucket, rags, and some of these obnoxious yellow gloves. Now I have wiped the entire boat and its full complement of tools several times, and there is still dust on everything. So we gave it a good enough and continued on to the next task. Yeah, some of it was really bad.
Alright, so I have my thing in epoxy. This first piece, just here, is, it's gonna be kind of hard to see, but is all grooved on the backside. And that's because it has such a complex curve going in that it wasn't gonna bend that way without lots of force. So we scored the back. Alright, so I just scored the whole back of this to help it bend a little better. So hopefully it fits the curve of the boat.
Once the boat was clean enough, Philip started laying down the framework for the remaining cork areas. Now these edge pieces were a bit tricky because of the many angles of the sole underneath. Initially we thought about having to cut each strip where the angles changed, but after some brainstorming, Philip decided that small bags of sand would work perfectly. The only hitch was when we remembered too late that we needed the bags of sand, and I temporarily donated these little black bags from my ankle weights that I, to be honest, use infrequently. They worked excellently for holding down the strips with an even pressure that followed the curves.
So this is like the funkiest little piece that goes right here. Looks a little bit ridiculous when there's nothing there, but it's the shape that's needed. So, all right. So I've gotten some of the edge pieces glued in, and now I'm gluing this one in, and this is next to the line that I drew, and so it lines up with all the other panels. So this is like my 0. So it's setting my how everything else will look. I've weighted down problematic areas, mainly with lots of bends or stuff like that. Throw that there. So I've got one more of these to glue in further back, and that will set how I glue everything else up. It's gonna be a nightmare trying to cut all these little diagonal pieces and get everything to fit with essentially a 1/4 inch seam all around them. But I think the results will be well worth it. Alright, so it may kind of look like I have gotten like nothing done tonight, but honestly, because of how it sets up for the future, this is a huge step forwards in this project. It'll allow me to progress forwards on everything else. So I'm excited with the progress. I mean, I do wish it was done, but we're making good strides forward. I've begun the process of laying up all of these pieces of cork. So just this strip is glued down. Everything else is just spaced out. And I'm trying to work on getting this edge to have a nice even 1/4 inch reveal. That's fairly close. But yeah, so I'm starting up front and lining them and then coming back and trimming up this back corner. Once I'm done with this side, I'll number them all. That way I have them laid out. And that will prevent me from having issues when it comes to like, hey, I put them back in the wrong order. So I made my marks of where this piece will contact, so it's line on line. I'll draw that line and then I'll make a 1/4 inch 6mm offset in this direction, and that will give me my spacing reveal on this edge, and then we'll drop in and I can work on gluing that in. And so that's just kind of how I've been going around and marking all of them so that they match the perimeter and look really nice. I've got one right there, I've got one right here. So I'm going to take my straight edge and line it up, and I'll draw my line. And so that's line on line. I take my ruler and make my offset marks. And draw my second line, and I cut the second line. Alright, so now this, if I did everything right, and it sits in here. Fit on the two sides. That's about as close as I can get to the correct reveal on this side. So yeah, that's just kind of the process over and over again.
And just like that, it was time for resin.
Alright, so I have everything taped up to start sealing all the seams. I'm just gonna run a vacuum over everything and then I can start applying the sealant. Alright, so I have finished smearing my caulk on all of the seams. At some point I'll go through and I'll pull tape. It's I think it's pretty good. There's definitely some spots that aren't my favorite, but it's what I could get done with what I had.
Do you want like a flashlight maybe would help?
Honestly, if you aren't standing where you're standing, it's way easier. Or you can like unplug and bring me my big light if you want. Like,
No, you're fine. It's fine. I'll go sit in the corner.
just grab the big light.
Where's the big light? Right there. I see. I spy
Like-
it. You're gonna get the caulk gun out of the sink.
Seems like an excellent place for it.
Oh, look at that.
It's almost sad to me that this is getting covered up because like
Yeah.
this is like masterfully done. I feel like
Yep.
all the little seams and joints, and it's like so much effort, and it's all gonna get covered in like laundry or other stuff or a duffel or something, and it's like ugh.
Right.
So I just finished pulling all of the tape off of the floor. I think it looks really nice. Now the challenge is not to step on the wet panels, which don't look much different than the not ones, but yeah, well, that's what it looks like. I'm super excited with how it turned out. Always there's spots that could use more work, but that's just life, I guess. So we're 6 days out from launching Bombadil. This is the state of affairs inside the boat. Honestly, it's better than it was a week ago, but it still needs to work. Some work done. The goal is I'm going to try to fill all of these openings with latches. That way that's all set for when the guys come in to set up the mast. So yeah, I finally got the fasteners needed to fasten the backside of them. Because I'm going through a little bit thicker of material than I think they were intended for, or that they thought they were going to use. So I bought some longer bolts, and we should be all set to install them. Our latch. Install it. It's a pretty snug fit. So we're gonna make sure it's angled the way we want. Seat it in. Flip it around. Bolts, retaining plate.
Alright, so here's the mostly finished product. You can see all the seams, all of that. You can see down around the mast, we got some spots in there. It did end up fitting pretty much perfectly. Didn't have to trim anything up, and then at some point in here we'll have to cut this up and then get it installed around the base of the mast as well. And then over here you can see we've got all the latches are installed. There's nothing for them to latch to at the moment. These guys have been painted with nonskid. They're just really dirty at the moment, and then all of these edges here we still have to do. So still on the list. Alright, so one more thing that is on the list is there's just a little bit of a height difference in all of these different panels, and they're not laying perfectly flat on the floor. So Philip's going to have to come in and do some fairing, some sanding, and leveling all of these out so that there's less of a height difference and so they don't creak, because right now as you walk across them they can get pretty loud. Join us next week while we finish up yet another project. And as always, thanks for watching.